I'm not aware of the ownership of that scheme, but you must be aware of the fact that several schemes have been built in this country by private developers. And sometimes those developers put in their own, well, very frequently those developers are responsible for putting in their own infrastructure. The roads, drains, waste disposal sometimes, electricity supply, and water supply. These are not normally the responsibility of central government. So the speed with which these utilities are provided to housing schemes would depend, first of all, on the ownership of the schemes. And I do not know that the government is actually the owner of some of these schemes. Many of them are really private developers. And if people pay for the services, they get the services more quickly. I have known of some schemes owned by some private developers, and although they've collected money from the potential or the prospective householders, they have not paid over those money to the utilities, for example, water and the electricity companies. Those companies, the GWI and the GPL, they work for money. And you pay them, they tend to do their work. And if you are planning to take up a home or a house within a private development, and you pay your money and you make sure that that development, the managers of that development do their work properly, you are probably going to get light and water more quickly than people who have an inefficient developer. So I can't answer the question as to who owns it, but I do believe that both the water and light and even telephone, most of the utilities will be provided once private developers engage in a commercial agreement with the people who are supplying the services.
Okay. And I know the caller also asked about the issue in Verbies.
No, I'm not aware of the protest on number 30 village.
All right. Good day to you, caller.
We're sorry, this number?
Good day to you.
Good afternoon to you and Mr. Granger. I'm calling in connection with the police on the road in the matter of road license. You know, the deadline has passed. It's not only traffic ranks is stopping vehicles. Any form of policeman is stopping vehicles. Once they have the uniform, black clothes, brown clothes, blue and black clothes, brown and black clothes, all of them is stopping vehicles for a license because they know that the deadline has gone. I'd like to know what is Mr. Granger take on that.
Okay.
It is a legitimate function of the police, regardless of which department they come from, whether they are black clothes or, as you say, other color clothing. They are law enforcement officers, and they have a legitimate right to enforce the law. And if persons are suspected of breaking the law by having unlicensed vehicles on the roads, it is a legitimate function. So it is not a traffic function alone. It is a regulatory function which policemen are authorized to perform.
Good afternoon to you. I'm sorry, caller, but you got to watch your volume. Mr. Granger, while we're waiting on other calls, earlier you mentioned, going back to the matter of fisher folk in Guyana, you mentioned that the Surinamese police were the ones who had actually initially arrested Kevin Long here in the Rhine, and of course the Minister of Home Affairs was talking about that a few days ago. What does that say for our local police?
What it says for the People's Progressive Civic Administration, that over the last 19 years, they have failed to suppress backtracking. They have failed to suppress contraband smuggling. They have failed to suppress illegalities on that Guyana-Suriname border. The Surinamese government has displayed its interest in ensuring that border relations between Guyana and Suriname are conducted in a legal and transparent manner. We have not had a similar response from the Guyana government. The Guyana government still encourages illegal movement between the two countries. We have a ferry, but there are still ferries which are operating, private ferries which are operating sometimes at a backtrack nature. And many of the transactions, many of the movements from these illegal ferries are really of a contraband nature. So what we find in Guyana and Suriname, that the administration in Suriname, the Surinamese government, is much more committed to legal operations, to a transparent operation, which is consistent with international law, than the Guyana government. The Guyana government condones activities which are known to be outside of the law, and that is the problem. That is why many pirates who escape from Guyana and go to Suriname are likely to be rounded up there. Okay. So it is a failure on the part of our government that people have, that our fishermen are suffering, and our government doesn't have the ability to pursue them and arrest them. The Surinamese government has an excellent navy. Don't forget, it was the Surinamese government naval elements which expelled the CGX platform in 2000, 11 years ago. So then they look after their citizens, they look after their territory, they look after their waterways much more efficiently than the PPP civic administration has been doing over the last 19 years.
Okay. Good day to you, caller.
Afternoon.
Hello.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
You know, it's really amazed me, the government. They don't really tell the people what they're doing, especially at this election time. What they're doing is a smear campaign to just stain everybody, you know, and what they're trying to tell people, especially their supporters, that they are the perfect ones, and the ones in opposition, they are the criminals and they are the bad ones. Because for a very long time I never heard Mr. Ramatar come on this television station, but soon after Walter Rodney anniversary, he came out bluntly and saying that PNC brutally murdered Mr. Walter Rodney. You understand? But if we look at it clearly, right, they're not trying to tell the people the truth, you know, because look how many Guyanese had been murdered with the Phantom Gang. You understand? And eventually after took Mr. Gadraj, you know, because all the fingers were pointing towards him, and the Phantom Gang were in Rajikan, and they took him and they sent him to India as ambassador, right? And all they're trying to do is just trying to paint anybody in the opposition, you know, as the bad one, and they are the good ones. So when you look at it now, it's a smear campaign, racial campaign. Everything that they're trying to do is just nasty and dirty. So in order, I think, for us to look at this whole situation with this racialness and with election campaign, I think sometimes we cannot look at this thing so in a way that, you know, we are innocent of what's going on. We have to tell the people if they are painting nastiness at us. We have to tell the people exactly what they are doing too, because this government is not now saying these people are so nasty and they are so blatant and they are so corrupt. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments, caller.
Thank you, caller. It's you made it a very strong statement, but I think you have put your finger on the button of what is happening in the People's Progressive Party civic election campaign. They have resorted to untruths. They have resorted to lies and smear and scandal. What has happened is that they are not looking to the future. And this is the difference between the PPPC and the APNU. We are thinking about our children. We are thinking about the future. We are thinking about what sort of country we want Guyana to be. The PPPC is looking back to something that happened 38 years ago or 31 years ago.
Exactly.
And very frequently, they're looking back in order to create, as you pointed out correctly, caller, they're trying to create the impression that some wrong was done by the People's National Congress. Now, let us look at the case of Walter Rodney. Many people have spoken about it. But the very person who has been accused of being used by the PNC administration of the day to kill Rodney actually wrote a book. People don't realize that he actually wrote a book. The so-called Mr. Gregory Smith, who was a sergeant in the Guyana Defense Force, wrote a book, The Assassination Cry of a Failed Revolution. And he explained in excruciating detail all of his relations with Mr. Rodney. So we have a situation in which the Working People's Alliance over the years called for inquiries, called for investigations. People have called for Mr. Smith to be brought back to the country because he was living in Cayenne to give evidence. But he actually wrote a book. He's dead now. I think he contracted cancer or some disease. But he did write the book before he died, and the book has been published. And it explains in detail how Rodney met his death. So if Mr. Ramattar was interested in the truth, instead of raking up a set of lies, he would get that book and read it. I have to make the same comment about Mr. Jagdeo, because Mr. Jagdeo made some accusations at Babu John in March this year about me personally. And if Mr. Jagdeo was interested in the truth, I can give him a copy of the commission of inquiry that investigated the shooting of the two boys on the Quarantine Coast in 1973, 38 years ago.